partial bibliography here. We're currently in episode 6. We've already had episode 5, the representatives strike back. We've already had episode 4, a new parameter. Episode 3, 2, and 1. So we're on episode 6 now. In the first paper, we answered the Hedetniemi question, and it turned out to be kind of cute. And so Pete and I were like, well, I wonder what else we could destroy. So we tried maximum matchings, and we tried, Pete got a hold of this kid, Hanel, and they did some longest paths and cycles. And then we keep going. So the Hanel-Johnson is in the Alabama Journal of Mathematics. And I've listed all these as congressuses because they're all just BOCA proceedings, because we're still circling where we're going to end up with this. But we're starting to see some overall trends. So we're starting to see where we're going to go with this stuff. So the first congressus is the open neighborhood problem. The second congressus is the independent set and matchings. The third congressus is, the F functions. They make some sense. And I have good news for anybody who's worried about the congressus papers. Congressus actually does not exist anymore. So I've told a couple of lies here. Congressus doesn't exist anymore because something went wrong in Canada. So the BOCA proceedings are now in Springer Nature, and they've got a new editorial board, and be nice to me or I'll send you referee requests because I'm on that team. And now we've dragged in Hoffman and Briggs, so it's growing, but I think we're starting to circle down to something useful. So let me define a graph. It's late March in the series. I think y'all know what a graph is. We're going to look at graphs that are simple, and because a lot of what we're really most interested in is the neighborhoods of vertices and the connections. Multiple edges are redundant, so we'll just do simple graphs, and self-adjacent vertices are, well, that's just a closed neighborhood, right? So that's kind of silly too. So let's make them all simple, and I don't got time for it, so we're just going to make them all finite. Look, a graph. All right, y'all, I just learned Tixie like in the pandemic, so I'm really proud of myself. So look, a graph. Open neighborhood is just the guys that are adjacent. A closed neighborhood includes the vertex itself. So if I take all of the neighborhoods of each of the vertices, right, so I end up with this list of sets. If we're looking at the closed neighborhoods, every one of those sets includes the vertex itself. So in order to introduce a system of distinct representatives, we would just take the vertex itself, right? Because every vertex shows up in its own neighborhood, in its own closed neighborhood. So it's a representative, and they'll all be distinct because we're taking each representative separately, right? So we're going to look at open neighborhoods. It's far more interesting. Here's my notation. I'm using big N subscript G with round parentheses. Closed neighborhoods get square brackets because that's the way we've always done it. Y'all know what an open neighborhood is. So look, there's the curly N. So my notation is going to be curly N is the set of capital N neighborhoods. Curly N of G is the set of capital N of G neighborhoods, right? I know y'all know math, but I want to reuse this notation later, so I want to make sure I've established it. So we're going to identify a distinct representative from each of these. What do you like? B, A, D, B, C, D, Yay. Yeah, there we go. Is that the only set of representatives? No. No, actually, it's not. And I've got a friend with an undergraduate who needs a project, and so we're going to try and sell the act of counting these sets to an undergraduate, because we think that the counting arguments will be pretty smooth. We could be lying to ourselves, but we think the counting arguments are going to go pretty smooth. There's a lot of symmetry that we can use. So here's the first round of this notation. Nobody panic, it's slightly gross. So we're going to call a graph SDR good if the index collection of neighborhoods has a system of distinct representatives. So a system of distinct representatives for the curly n is a one-to-one function phi from the vertex edge to the vertex edge, such that the phi of v is in the neighborhood. So each vertex's representative is in its own neighborhood for every vertex in G. Yeah, because there's no loops, it's cool, all right? Nobody is his own representative because we're not having any loops and we're not doing any closed business. So we got a theorem pretty quickly out of this one, which was kind of awesome, and it's a cute theorem. It's really kind of cute. A graph G is SDR good, so a graph has an open neighborhood system of distinct representatives if and only if it has a spanning subgraph, the components of which are either single edges or cycles. We can clean that up, we can mess with that, we can mutilate that, we can lemma, we can corollary, but that's our theorem. It's kind of cute. Let me see if I got my picture here. Where's my picture? There's my picture. Right, so the system of distinct representatives, you see that we can treat the whole graph as having a spanning 5 cycle, right? You go sort of around the edges, A, B, C, D, E. There's a spanning 5 cycle. So one possible system of distinct representatives is, look at the cycle, A, B, C, D, E, and now every vertex, look to your left. So vertex A, your set of neighborhoods representatives will be B. Vertex B, your neighborhood's representatives will be C. C, your representative will be D. Second system of distinct representatives, check out that 5 cycle. Okay, now everybody look to your right. So vertex B, your neighborhood's representative will be A. Vertex A, your representative will be E, right? We can also look at this graph as having a spanning subgraph consisting of the small cycle, ABE, the 3 cycle, and a single edge off to the side. So we look at the single edge, CD. C, your representative is D. D, your representative is C. Good job, everyone. Over in the 3 cycle, you've got 2 possible representatives. Either look to your left or look to your right. Okay, so I counted 4. Right, this guy has 4 representatives, 4 possible SDRs for the neighborhood problem. Could it have more than that? I don't think this guy has more than that, but once we've defined the spanning subgraph of a graph, we can count the different systems of distinct representatives pretty quickly. So we're expecting that that one's going to be kind of fun, especially since things like spanning subgraphs are already so well studied. So it's good if it has a spanning subgraphs, the components of which are either single edges or cycles. Okay. So we can do it structurally looking at the graph rather than the set notation. We can also prove this using the set notation, but it starts to smell like peat and you get a lot of yeah, so it works. It works.
That's
God,
hilarious.
I hope everybody knows who Pete is, right?
That's funny.
Y'all know who Pete is? Yeah, okay.
Cool. Yep.
I hope, like, people who don't know Pete don't think that I'm making up a fictional character. He's a real person. So yeah, we could do a set theoretic proof. It's adorable. But I like the graph version. I like the structural problem better. It's just funner and prettier. So yeah, the next thing we did was maximum matchings and maximum independent sets. I think I was expecting this to be like way more exciting than it actually was. I think my hopes got ahead of me. But, you know, we slogged through it. So I spent all the time on the notation for the preceding operation. So now I'm not going to spend super much of time on the notation because y'all get it, right? Curly M is the set of all maximum matchings. Big M is a matching, right? And so this time, instead of like mapping onto the vertices, I'm going to map onto the edge sets. But yeah, that's cool. That's not such a big deal. We're actually using the same notation. And down at the bottom here, I've got, note that the existence of such a function requires that the number of edges is bigger than the number of matchings. So this is our obvious necessary condition. Obviously, if you've got 5 different maximum matchings and there's only 4 edges in the graph, you can't find a system of distinct representatives because there's not enough edges, right? So the obvious necessary condition is always going to be that you have at least enough edges, at least enough vertices, whatever, to make the maximum matching. Our goal in life, as it has been, as it always will be, is to find Tonkas, that the obvious necessary conditions are sufficient, or a really good reason that they're not. Oh my God, it's the same graph. Yes. You know why? Because I just learned TXI. So we're going to look at some maximum matchings. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 matchings, and good news, everyone. There's 6 edges. So can I find a system of distinct representatives? Yes. We're hoping for Tonkas. Oh, we end up with necessary, but not sufficient. Well, boo. What do you mean it's not sufficient? Oh, yeah, kind of obviously. Somebody with a bridge. Somebody with a bridge. Bridges are going to be a problem. I was kind of hoping claws were going to be a problem because I hate claws. But it turns out bridges are the problem. It turns out the bridge is the problem, right? Because any maximum matching is going to have somebody from the top 3 and somebody from the bottom 4, right? So AC, GD, BC, DF, right? And there's 2 ways to pick the top guy, 3 ways to pick the bottom guy. 2 times 3 is 6. So 6 edges. I should be good, right? No, there is no maximum matching that's going to use the CD edge. Right? There's no maximum matching that's going to use the CD edge. So bridge is bad. Bridge is bad. It turns out that's the only problem that we can identify. So let's flip it around. Now, independent sets, maximum independent sets. I'd spent some time on the maximum matchings. And I don't know why, because I don't really like edges. I like vertices better. But I spent some time on the maximum matching. So when I got to the maximum independent sets, I didn't want to spend a huge amount of time because they're kind of the same thing. Like, if we know that the graph does have a system of distinct representatives for a maximum matching, then its line graph is going to be independent good, right? The line graph is going to be independent good because the independence of a line graph is the same as the matching of the original graph. So I'm just going to convert all of my preceding statements by line graph, right? So here's my graph, and I found my maximum matching. And so hopefully, like magic, boom, it's a line graph. So look at this. Look at the magic. Oh, yeah. So I've renamed all my vertices with their edge names from the previous graph. And now finding an independent set, instead of naming edges, I'm naming vertices. And I'm trying to be stupidly literal about it, or exceedingly literal about it, and naming them with 2 letters instead of 1. Right? So is that it? Are we done? Is that everything? Actually, almost. there's 9 Beinecke graphs. The Lowell Beinecke identified those graphs that don't line graph. And so we went through and manually resolved all of those because there's just so few cases that we went through and manually resolved those. That, yeah, independence number is going to behave exactly the same as maximum matching. Maximum matching, not maximal, maximum. And our problem is always going to be bridges or cut vertices. So then I left Pete unsupervised, and he found Haenel, and they went ahead and knocked out maximum paths. And they're using SDRP good. Big P, V star, P, right? So they're doing the same thing over again. It's necessary but not sufficient. Check it out. And they had to introduce slightly more excitement. If every vertex lies on no more than Q paths, if every vertex lies on at least, then it's not good. They did the same thing over again for cycles and got pretty much the same thing. So it's been good to know that parallels work the way you kind of thought they were going to work. So we said, why not do it again for maximal cliques? You know, at this point, we're just going through the book and like grab the next graph parameter and see if it does something nifty. Why not? I mean, eventually we're going to hit on a graph parameter that really speaks to us. So I thought, let's try a maximal clique. So same thing again. And the maximal cliques are super annoying because we got curly K, plain K, big K, little K. There's K's all over the place. And it's nasty to pronounce it. Here's what was fun. Yeah, so we get our usual necessary conditions. Right. And we're Tonkas again, hoping that we've got these. So which graphs can we classify the graphs that meet these parameters, and what do we know about those graphs that's nifty and not nifty? So 1972, Steve Hedetniemi. See, it's not just about Pete. There's Steve too. So 1972, Steve and my other favorite Pete Slater, Steve and Pete wrote a paper on maximum iterated cliques. So I don't know that anybody has touched this since about 1972. I'm sure someone has. They may have changed the language, and I'm really hoping they changed the notation while they were at it. So an iterated clique, yeah. The guys Pete and Slater and Hedetniemi, they created a K of G. So I've got a graph G, it's got a bunch of maximal cliques up in it. Maybe the maximal cliques are all K2s, maybe the maximal all cliques, we got some K3s, some triangulations, right? Maybe the maximal cliques are all just really dense little puppies. We got a little K7s over here and over there, right? They're going to create something they're calling a clique graph, where they're going to contract each maximal clique to a single vertex. So in a relatively uninteresting graph, we will be contracting all of the K2s, the edges, to single vertices. Oh, so if the graph is boring enough, then the clique graph is the line graph. Okay, cool. Yeah, if the graph is boring enough, then the clique graph is the line graph. But Slater and Hedetniemi didn't stop there. Slater and Hedetniemi were like, you know what? If I can clique graph a graph, I can clique graph the clique graph of a graph. So they defined a K2, right? So K squared. And then I think it's possible that they stayed up past their bedtime because they were like, we can clique graph the clique graph of the clique graph of the clique graph I times. Right. Clearly up past their bedtime. And yet there are graphs that once we start defining these clique graphs, the graph and the clique graphs, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they just start blowing up. And there's other graphs that we start messing with, and they smush down to a single vertex, right? So we'll talk about convergent and divergent. We'll talk about graphs who click, 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 and you end up with a single vertex. And you're like, man, that's cute. And then there's other graphs that you click, 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 and boom! It's clique divergent. Right. It turns out that this does actually come back to our system of distinct representatives. When a graph is clique divergent, it's not going to be SDR clique good, because before even diverging it, the graph is going to have so much structure that there's more clique action than there are vertices, right? So we're going to run out of representatives in the first iteration. Is it all the convergent ones that go down to the boom? Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be. So the problem that we're stuck with then is the self-clique graphs. Okay, C4. C4, it's the self-clique graphs. It's the self-clique graphs. And partly I like them because I don't have to use a limit, and so I don't feel continuous and like I'm betraying my own self. But yeah, the self-clique graphs end up behaving a lot like our original neighborhood graphs. Anybody who's got a cycle or a couple edges up in there just ends up being the same. So, hey, nice. Nice. Yeah, things get better for us after a minute. So I felt pretty good about that, and then I kept throwing darts, and the next thing I hit was a minimum dominating set. Again, minimum, not minimal. Minimum dominating set. Same as with the matchings, I'm always going for maximum. The cliques was maximal. But graph from minimum dominating set, because we like domination. Everybody loves domination. All right, same question. I'm going to use a bold gamma. We're running out of letters. So yeah, let's just go with a bold gamma. Is minimum dominating getting at us anything that we didn't have previously? Is it going to lead us anywhere? So Tonkus, the necessary conditions are not sufficient. Necessary conditions are not sufficient. But is it just going to be some kind of a cluster in there? Is that going to be what's going wrong with us? What's the actual problem going to be with the graph? What is going to be the component of the graph that we dislike the most? Is it necessary? Yes. Is it sufficient? No. The conjecture is that it's sufficient. It's not. It turns out that the problem with these graphs, it looks like they're going to do really, really, really well, and then there'll be a D vertex, a vertex of larger degree that really messes with us. There's going to be and it's not well defined yet because this is the one we're still chewing on. It's not well defined yet, but there's going to be a claw problem. Going to be a problem with the claw. It's that cut vertex in the center of the claw. So it's going to be a type of induced subgraph. Or subgraphs that give us a claw. So that's going to be gross. So what else can we do to this? I got 33 slides left, and it's only 10:29, or yeah, 9:29. Oh yeah, back to the beginning. Back to the beginning. Right, so if I'm looking at the neighborhood of a graph, neighborhood of a vertex, and I'm going to say that the graph has a system of distinct representatives based on the open neighborhood if and only if it has a spanning subgraph comprised of cycles and single edges. So I'm looking at my plain neighborhood question right this second. And you know how we like to pretend that there's real-world applications for math? It's a real-world application, y'all. So every house in the senior living community is going to have a buddy that keeps an eye on them. It's sort of like Cold War prison guards. Anyway, yeah, so Some of these guys are going to watch each other, and some of these guys are going to pairwise watch each other in the case of a single edge. Some of these guys are going to turn to your left, watch each other in the case of a cycle. So this is the same question that I had previously, right? Same graph, same neighborhood, and we're like, oh, looks like we're doing C watches D, D watches C, and then the 3 cycle. Okay, no big deal. Sounds great. Every vertex has a watcher, somebody that is watching them. Every vertex has a watcher, one watcher. What if vertex E was secretly Kanye West? We would all be watching Kanye, wouldn't we? Like, oh my God, everybody stare at Kanye. Everybody stare at Kanye. So we're going to say G is a finite simple graph, no isolated vertices on the natural numbers, including 0. Suppose that F is the index function where there's F satisfying choice subset representatives. And every time you think this looks like the nastiest thing you've seen, we're going to make it worse. All right. We're going to give each vertex some watchers. So maybe some vertices get 0 watchers because they're not Kanye West. Maybe some vertices get 3 watchers because they are Kanye. Maybe we're living in a more egalitarian community. Everybody gets 1 watcher. So we're going to look at a finite simple graph, no isolated vertices, and we're going to say that we have a satisfying choice of subset representatives. And F is a function that tells me how many representatives I'm going to throw up at each vertex, how much watching each vertex needs. So the constant function is satisfied. The constant function, sorry, F equals 0 is satisfied. Nobody watches anybody. Like, remember how we all lived before the pandemic when you didn't know your neighbors? It was so cool. Nobody watches anybody. If we want a constant function, F equals 1, so every vertex has 1 watcher. I can make that work. I can make that work. Can I define a scenario in which every vertex gets 2 watchers? Not using neighborhoods. Not using neighborhoods. But what if instead of using neighborhoods, what if I had a graph with a thick enough structure that I could give each maximal clique 2 vertices? What if each maximal clique in the graph had 2 representatives? Yeah, that could work if I had sort of a thick enough graph, right? If it was thick enough, then I could give each maximal clique 2 vertex representatives. Oh, okay, so the clique thing wasn't stupid after all. Okay, all right, cool. For what F can I find a family of watchers for this graph? Well, I know that the sum of the F has to be 5 or less, because I've only got 5 vertices to do watching, unless I look at a line graph, something else. I know that I can do constants, 0s, and 1s. I know that I can do several of these sort of mixed bag things where 2 people are watching 1 vertex and nobody's watching another vertex, right? I know there's a couple of those combos I can't do. But mostly, yeah, I can set myself up pretty well. If you've got 2 graphs on the same set of vertices, does it follow that they if they have the same F, that they have the same edge set? Oh. So do these guys have the same F function, right? Can I assign 3 watchers to B in both of these? Yeah. Can I assign 3 watchers to B and assign 3 watchers to E? And oh, so they don't actually have the same F, do they? Oh, they do. I can assign 3 watchers to E. So this ends up getting a little bit on the entertaining end of the spectrum. It's rather amusing. But yeah, if they are distinct trees and they have distinct ordered degree lists, then they won't have the same. Right? if the graphs are not necessarily connected in the same way, they both emit this F, they have different girths, but because one is not connected, one does include the constant function and one does not. So, well, I just gave another example to prove my point. And it turns out if they're on the same set of vertices and they're not the same graphs and they're not going to have the same Fs, well, yeah. And the other direction, yes. Where am I? Okay. This is the newer stuff that should actually match what your brain was trying to do at the very beginning there. Right? It should match what your brain was trying to do at the very beginning. A list assignment to a graph G is a function L, where every vertex gets a list. And that list is going to be a finite subset of some set of integers C, or some set of labels C. We most often talk about a list assignment as a precursor to a list coloring in a graph. So list coloring in a graph is, oh, hey, I feel like I've seen that notation before. Was it foreshadowing? It was. Yes. Right, so when we assign a list coloring, right, a proper list coloring of a graph G, it's where we pick one color from the list at each vertex so that every vertex gets colored by somebody from his list and that no two adjacent vertices end up with the same color. Hey. Hey. It kind of reminds me of the Watcher thing. Kind of reminds me of the Watcher thing. Kind of reminds me of a system of distinct. It's not the same though, is it? It's not the same though, because in a list coloring, if some vertex over yonder and some vertex over yay both have color blue in their list, they could both use color blue. We don't have that distinct requirement. Right? In a system of distinct representatives, we're going to require that no two vertices are both colored blue. In this case, they can both be blue as long as they're not adjacent. So we'll reimagine the process of identifying representative from a set as choosing a proper coloring from a list where the list is formed by the neighborhood vertex. So this is very similar to the representative set, but it's a little bit looser because you can reuse a color as long as they're far enough away, right? So a G coloring a graph is a proper coloring, but instead of picking random lists or lists you buy at Walmart, we're going to define our lists to be the neighborhoods. We're going to define our list to be the neighborhoods. So a G coloring of a graph H is a function. Oh, that's the same thing. Yeah. So we're going to define the list of colors by the neighborhoods in G. And since H has the same vertices, we can color H using the G neighborhoods as lists and the proper coloring requirement that no two adjacent vertices in H get the same color. Sweet. If H is G colorable, then so is every spanning subgraph of H. Yeah. 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 If I remove edges, yeah, I'm good. Adding edges might make something less colorable. Transitivity subgraphs and isolated vertices cause so many problems because if it doesn't have any neighbors, then it doesn't have a list. And if it doesn't have a list, then it can't get the, so no. If a graph G is G colorable, we say it's self-colorable, right? So the list applied to every vertex is precisely the open neighborhood of that vertex. Sweet. Here's our theorem. We've got two proofs of this theorem. They're awesome. One of them is due to Pete, and it's 4 pages long, and I think there's a limit, and possibly an integral, and multiple cases. The second proof is due to Hoffman, and I haven't actually seen it, but it's a half page. So that tells you everything you ever wanted to know about Pete and Dean, right there. So yeah, Pete has beautiful thoughts, man. They're beautiful thoughts. They're like 4 pages, but they're gorgeous. And then Dean's just like, oh, schmoop. Okay, buddy. So G is self-colorable if and only if it has no isolated vertices. So we're not going to require that the graph is connected. Not necessary. We're still going to keep it simple, but just no isolated vertices. So we're very much broader than we were with our original open neighborhood question, where the graph had to have a spanning subgraph of cycles and single edges. This, we're not even requiring that much. We can have little trees, and we can have the violator of the original theorem, the claw, right? Because the claw has no isolated vertices. It is self-colorable. The claw, right, K13, does not have a spanning subgraph that is entirely made up of cycles and single edges. So it's a good example of somebody where we're going to have to reuse a color. Right? We're going to reuse a color. Claw! K13. We'll call him F for right now, but you know who he really is. He's the claw. The open neighborhood of A is BCD, open neighborhood of these guys, right? So a self-coloring of B, C, and D, I'm just going to color all of them A. Cool. Yeah, because they're not neighbors. And then what do you want to color A? You pick. B, C, D. I mean, you get to pick, right? When we get to counting how many different self-colorings there are of a graph, this will be about the only place that we have to count stuff. So we already know that a graph is self-colorable if it has a spanning cycle and single edges. We know that a graph is self-colorable if it has no isolated vertices, which is even broader. So the claw has the following property. No graph H on the 4 vertices that properly contains the claw is F-colorable. So as soon as you add an edge, you shot yourself in the foot. Don't add edges. Isn't that fun? Add an edge. I dare you. I mean, don't add an edge that's already there because that's silly. But like, go ahead and get you a BC edge. Ooh. Yeah, check it out. Isn't that neat? Isn't that neat? I thought that was so cool. So yeah, nifty response there. So are there any other self-coloring graphs that have that same interesting property? Don't know. Don't know. Are there any others? It may just be the claw, which is interesting because the claw shows up in another place. It's the claw. There's going to be another Pete paper in the universe where the entire punchline is the claw is the counterexample. So which self-coloring graphs have the same interesting properties as the claw? I'm willing to believe there's not any others, but don't.
Oh, we cannot hear you.
It seems like she has some problem with the internet.
All right, my internet.
Oh, all right. We already hear you.
Okay. Is Kennesaw so far?
Sarah, say something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. Yeah.
Sarah, where are you?
The fun stuff is in the list colorings, we think, because you've got more wiggle room than in the system of distinct representatives. So that's the best punchline I've got for you, is who else is self-colorable, because self-colorable is similar to the distinct representatives, but
can you please share your screen? I cannot see.
I apologize for knowledge.
Yeah. Dr. Holiday, we don't hear you and we don't see the slide anymore.
Oh, I've gone missing?
Yeah, would you please share it again? I think we still have some slides left.
Yeah, we have about left, but my internet is closed down. So I rejoined on my cell phone. I'm gonna have to email my slides to you as soon as the internet comes back up.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I'm terribly sorry, but yeah, we got down to the very end, so we got through most of the fun stuff, and the rest is gonna be huge.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have any questions for our speaker? And Dr. Voloshin, maybe he has some.
Yes. Yes, I have a couple of questions. Sarah, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you
I can
well.
hear you. You got it.
Okay, so you had so many results, and my question, the first question is this: in many proofs and all the proofs, are there any proofs which do not use whole theorem explicitly or implicitly?
Which don't use which theorem?
Which do not use whole theorem about the matchings in bipartite graph?
No, a lot of them are going to end up coming back to Hall. If you want to do it the fast way, we can do it the long way.
Yeah.
But it takes about 4 pages and nobody wants to read that.
Okay. Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can avoid Hall very easily, but well, not very easily. I can avoid Hall, but it takes about 4 pages.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking again. Also, another question: is there any relation between these problems and coloring problems?
Yeah, I think we're going to spend the rest of our time coloring, especially the list coloring. Using list coloring is a launch point for the rest of this.
What is I'm sure you know that for list colorings, there is a model in mixed hypergraph coloring theory without any lists. So basically, list coloring is a special case of mixed hypergraph coloring without any lists.
Ooh. That could be very juicy.
Yeah. So maybe you can look at these problems from that point of view, because there's an all special case of colorability of mixed hypergraph, some special mixed hypergraph. which can be constructed having graph and list of colors.
Oh. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
And my final question is, of course, you basically investigate, from my point of view, the hypergraphs, right? Because those sets are hyperedges and we have some properties. And did you ever think about the properties like Helly property?
No, because I tend to avoid hypergraphs, and I know I'm going to have to get over myself pretty soon. So this may be the impetus for me to get over it. And
yeah, okay, because there are so many properties of hypergraphs which, when projected to graph, they have their simpler versions, but more general cases are in hypergraph theory. So it's very interesting to look from that point of view.
yeah, this may be where I end up spending my next few months.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, thank
Wonderful
you.
talk.
I thank you, Dr. Valosin. Do you have anything else for our speaker? So if not, please thanks our speaker for interesting talk, and yeah, we see you next week.
Great
Thank
talk.
you, Dr.
Thank you.
Holiday.
Thank you, sir.